Freedom Party of Austria. The Freedom Party of Austria, German, Freiheitliche Partei Österreichs, FPÖ, is a right-wing populist and national conservative political party in Austria. It was led by Norbert Hofer from September 2019 to 1 June 2021. It is the third largest of 5 parties in the National Council, with 30 of the 183 seats, and won 16.2% of votes cast in the 2019 legislative election. It is represented in all 9 state legislatures, and a member of 2 state cabinets, both operating under the Proporz system. On a European level, the FPÖ is a founding member of the Identity and Democracy Party, and its 3 members of the European Parliament, MEPs, sit with the Identity and Democracy ID group. The FPÖ was founded in 1956 as the successor to the short-lived Federation of Independents VDU, representing pan-Germanists and national liberals opposed to socialism, represented by the Social Democratic Party of Austria (SPÖ), and Catholic clericalism, represented by the Austrian People's Party (OVP). Its first leader, Anton Rienthaler, was a former Nazi functionary and SS officer, though the party did not advocate extreme right policies and presented itself as residing in the political center. During this time, the FPÖ was the third largest party in Austria and had modest support. Under the leadership of Norbert Steger in the early 1980s, it sought to style itself on the German Free Democratic Party. It supported the first government of SPÖ Chancellor Bruno Kreisky after the 1970 election, as well as that of Fred Sinowatz from 1983 to 1986. Georg Hayder became leader of the party in 1986, after which it began an ideological turn towards right-wing populism. This resulted in a strong surge in electoral support, but also led the SPÖ to break ties and a splinter in the form of the Liberal Forum in 1993. In the 1999 election, the FPÖ won 26.9% of the vote, becoming the second most popular party, ahead of the OVP by around 500 votes. The 2 parties eventually reached a coalition agreement in which OVP retained the office of Chancellor. The FPÖ soon lost most of its popularity, falling to 10% in the 2002 election, but the government was renewed. Internal tensions led Hayder and much of the party leadership to leave in 2005, forming the Alliance for the Future of Austria (BZO), which replaced the FPÖ as governing partner. Heinz Christian Streeck then became leader, and the party gradually regained its popularity, peaking at 26.0% in the 2017 election. The FPÖ once again became junior partner in government with the OVP. In May 2019, the Ibiza affair led to the collapse of the government and the resignation of Streeck from both the offices of vice-chancellor and party leader. The resulting snap election saw the FPÖ fall to 16.2% and return to opposition. History. Political background. The FPÖ is a descendant of the pan-German and national liberal camp Lager dating back to the revolutions of 1848 in the Habsburg areas. During the interwar era, the national liberal camp gathered in the Greater German People's Party fought against the mutually hostile Christian, social, and Marxist camps in their struggles to structure the new republic according to their respective ideologies. After a short civil war, the federal state of Austria, an authoritarian Christian social dictatorship, was established in 1934. By 1938, with the Anschluss of Austria into Nazi Germany, the national liberal camp, which had always striven for an inclusion of Austria into a Greater Germany, had been swallowed whole by Austrian National Socialism, and all other parties were eventually absorbed into Nazi totalite. Both socialists and Christian socials were persecuted under the Nazi regime, and the national liberal camp was scarred after the war due to guilt by association with National Socialism. In 1949, the Federation of Independents (VDU) was founded as a national liberal alternative to the main Austrian parties, the Social Democratic Party (SPÖ) and the Austrian People's Party (OVP), successors to the interwar era Marxist and Christian social parties. The VDU was founded by two liberal Salzburg journalists, former Nazi Germany prisoners, who wanted to stay clear of the mainstream socialist and Catholic camps and feared that hostility following the hastily devised post. 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 Aiming to become a political home to everyone not a member of the two main parties, the VDU incorporated an array of political movements including free market liberals, populists, former Nazis and German nationalists, all of whom had been unable to join either of the two main parties. The VDU won 12% of the vote in the 1949 general election, but saw its support beginning to decline soon afterward. It evolved into the FPO by 1955/56, after merging with the minor Freedom Party in 1955. A new party was formed on 17 October 1955. Early years 1956-1980. The first FPO party leader was Anton Rienthaler, a former Nazi Minister of Agriculture and SS officer. He had been asked by OVP Chancellor Julius Raab to take over the movement rather than let it be led by a more socialist-leaning group. While the majority of former Nazis had probably joined the two main parties in absolute numbers, they formed a greater percentage of FPO members due to the party's small size. Nevertheless, none of them were real revolutionaries, and they pursued pragmatic, non-ideological policies, and the FPO presented itself as a moderate party. The FPO served as a vehicle for them to integrate in the Second Republic. The party was a welcome partner with both the SPO and OVP in regional and local politics, although it was excluded at the national level. The OVP and the FPO ran a joint candidate for the 1957 presidential election, who lost. Rienthaler was replaced as leader in 1958 by Friedrich Peter, also a former SS officer, who led the party through the 1960s and 1970s and moved it towards the political center. In 1966, the OVP-SPO Grand Coalition, which had governed Austria since the war was broken, was put to an end when the OVP gained enough votes to govern alone. SPO leader Bruno Kreisky, himself a Jew, defended Peter's past and initiated a political relationship and a personal friendship with Peter. In 1970, the FPO was, for the first time, able to tolerate an SPO minority government. In 1967, the more extreme faction in the FPO broke away and established the National Democratic Party, seen by some observers as a final shedding of the party's Nazi legacy. Under the influence of Kreisky, a new generation of liberals brought the FPO into the Liberal International in 1978. During the years under Peter, the party never won more than 8% of the national vote in general elections, and generally did not have much political significance. It did, however, demand electoral reforms that benefited smaller parties as the price for tolerating Kreisky's minority government. Steger leadership 1980-1986. Hayder leadership 1986-2000. With Georg Hayder as the new party leader, the 1989 Carinthia provincial election caused a sensation. The SPO lost its majority and the OVP was relegated to third-party status, as the FPO finished second with 29% of the vote. The FPO formed a coalition with the OVP, with Hayder as governor of Carinthia, at this point his greatest political triumph. By the 1990 general election, the party had moved away from the liberal mainstream course, instead focusing on immigration and becoming increasingly critical of the political establishment and the EU. Following a remark made by Hayder in 1991 about the decent employment policy of Nazi Germany in contrast to that of the current Austrian government, he was removed as governor by a joint SPO-OVP initiative and replaced by the OVP Christoph Cernetto. Later that year, however, the FPO saw gains made in 3 provincial elections, most notably in Vienna. While Hayder often employed controversial rhetoric, his expressed political goals included small government with more direct democracy rather than centralized totalitarianism. Following the increasing importance of immigration as a political issue. In 1993, the party decided to launch the Austria First initiative calling for a referendum on immigration issues. The initiative was controversial and 5 FPÖ MP, including Hayder, left the party and founded the Liberal Forum Life. The FPÖ relations with the Liberal International also became increasingly strained, and later that year the FPÖ left the ally which was preparing to expel it. In turn, the Life soon joined the Liberal International instead. In 1999, Hayder was again elected governor of Carinthia. Coalition government 2000-2005. In the 1999 general election, the FPÖ won 27% of the votes, more than in any previous election, beating the OVP for the first time by a small margin. In February 2000, the OVP agreed to form a coalition government with the FPÖ. Normally, Hayder should have become federal chancellor. However, it soon became apparent that Hayder was too controversial to be part of the government, let alone lead it. Amid intense international criticism of the FPÖ participation in the government, the FPÖ ceded the chancellorship to Wolfgang Schüssel of the OVP. As a concession to the FPÖ, the party was given the power to appoint the ministers of finance and social affairs. Later that month, Hayder stepped down as party chairman, replaced by Susanne Reiss-Passer. Having threatened a diplomatic boycott of Austria, the other 14 European Union (EU) countries introduced sanctions after the government had been formed. Other than formal EU meetings, contacts with Austria were reduced. The measures were justified by the EU, which stated that the admission of the FPÖ into a coalition government legitimizes the extreme right in Europe. The party had been kept on the sidelines for most of the Second Republic, except for its brief role in government in the 1980s. Along with the party's origins and its focus on issues such as immigration and questions of identity and belonging, the party had been subjected to a strategy of cordon sanitaire by the SPÖ and OVP. The EU sanctions were lifted in September after a report had found that the measures were effective only in the short term. In the long run, they might give rise to an anti-EU backlash. Some observers noted an inconsistency in that there had been no sanctions against Italy when the post-fascist Italian social movement/National Alliance had entered government in 1994. The FPÖ struggled with its shift from an anti-establishment party to being part of the government, which led to decreasing internal stability and electoral support. Its blue-collar voters became unhappy with the party's need to support some neoliberal OVP economic reforms. The government's peak in unpopularity occurred when tax reform was postponed at the same time that the government was planning to purchase new interceptor jets. Internecine strife erupted in the party over strategy between party members in government and Hayder, who allied himself with the party's grassroots. Several prominent FPÖ government ministers resigned in the 2002 Mittelfeld putsch after strong attacks by Hayder, which led to new elections being called. In the subsequent election campaign, the party was deeply divided and unable to organize an effective political strategy. It changed leaders 5 times in less than 2 months, and in the 2002 general election decreased its share of the vote to 10.2%. Almost 2/3 less than its previous share. Most of its voters sided with the OVP, which became the largest party in Austria with 43% of the vote. Nevertheless, the coalition government of the OVP and FPÖ was revived after the election. However, there was increasing criticism within the FPÖ against the party's mission of winning elections at any cost. Hayder's departure for BZO. After an internal row had threatened to tear the FPÖ apart, former chairman Georg Hayder, then chairwoman, and his sister Ursula Hodner, vice-chancellor Hubert Gorbach, and all of the FPÖ ministers left the party and on 4 April 2005 founded a new political party called the Alliance for the Future of Austria (BZO). Austria's Chancellor Wolfgang Schüssel followed, changing his coalition with the FPÖ into cooperation with the BZO. In Hayder's stronghold of Carinthia, the local FPÖ branch became the Carinthia branch of the BZO. Streik's early leadership 2005-2017. The FPÖ fared much better than the BZO in polls following the 2005 split, with the first tests in regional elections in Styria and Burgenland. On 23 April 2005, Heinz Christian Streeck was elected as new chairman of the FPO, taking over from interim leader Hilmar Kabus. As most of the party's office-seeking elite had gone over to the BZO, the FPO was again free from responsibility. Under Streeck, the party's ideology grew more radical, and it returned to its primary goal of vote maximizing. The FPO did reasonably well in October's Vienna election, in which Streeck was the leading candidate and ran a campaign directed strongly against immigration. It took a 14.9% share, while the BZO won just 1.2%. By the 2006 general election, the FPO returned to promoting anti-immigration, anti-Islam and Eurosceptic issues. It won 11% of the vote and 21 seats in parliament, while the BZO only barely passed the 4% threshold needed to enter parliament. The subsequent coalition between the SPÖ and the OVP left both parties in opposition. In the 2008 general election, both the FPO and the BZO rose significantly at the expense of the SPÖ and the OVP. Both parties increased their percentage of the vote by about 6.5%, with the FPO at 17.4% and the BZO at 10.7%, together gaining 28.2%, and thus both breaking the record vote for the FPO in the 1999 election. In the 2009 European Parliament election, the FPO doubled its 2004 results, winning 12.8% of the vote and 2 seats. In December 2009, the local Carinthia branch of the BZO, its stronghold, broke away and founded the Freedom Party in Carinthia FPK. It cooperated with the FPO at the federal level, modeling itself on the German CDU/CSU relationship. The leader of the branch, Schuch, had fallen out with BZO leader Joseph Butcher after the latter had introduced a moderate, right-wing liberal and more economically oriented ideology. In the 2010 Vienna elections, the FPO increased its vote to 25.8%, slightly less than the record result of 1996. This was seen as a victory for Streeck due to his popularity among young people. This was only the second time in the post-war era that the SPÖ lost its absolute majority in the city. After its convention in early 2011, midway between general elections, the FPÖ had a support in opinion polls of around 24–29% at par with the SPÖ and OVP, and above the BZO. Among people under 30 years of age, the FPÖ had the support of 42%. In the 2013 legislative election, the party obtained 20.51% of votes, while BZO scored 3.53% and lost all of its seats. After the election, SPÖ and OVP renewed their coalition, and FPÖ remained in opposition. In June 2015, the main part of the Federal Party section of Salzburg split off and formed the Free Party Salzburg. In the 2016 Austrian presidential election, Freedom Party candidate Norbert Hofer won the first round of the election, receiving 35.1% of the vote, making that election the Freedom Party's best-ever election result in its history. However, in the second round, Hofer was defeated by Alexander van der Bellen, who received the support of 50.3% compared to Hofer's 49.7%. In July 1st, the Constitutional Court of Austria voided the results of the second round due to mishandling of postal votes, although the court did not find evidence of deliberate manipulation. The revote took place on 4 December 2016, when van der Bellen won by a significantly larger margin. Coalition Government 2017–2019. In the 2017 Austrian legislative election, the FPÖ obtained 26% of votes, increased its seats by 11 seats to 51 seats, achieving its best result since the 1999 election. It was leading every other party until Sebastian Kurz became the leader of the OVP, and polling still predicted it would reach second place. Despite the FPÖ decline in support during the election campaign, it still achieved an ideological victory as Austria's governing parties The FPO entered coalition talks with the OVP, and in December 2017, they reached an agreement and created a coalition government. The FPO gained control over 6 ministries, including Defense, the Interior and Foreign Affairs. May 2019. In mid-May 2019, secretly made footage was released, apparently showing Streik soliciting funds for the party from a purported Russian national. In the video, Streik also suggests his intention to censor the Austrian media in a way that would favor the FPO, citing the media landscape of Orban's Hungary. The footage led to the collapse of the coalition with the OVP on 20 May 2019. Post-Ibiza era 2019-present. In the 2019 general election, the party's support collapsed to 16%, down from 26% in 2017. In the aftermath of the election, they collapsed to a record low of 10% in April 2020, but as of May 2021, they have stabilized to around 16–17%. Norbert Hofer replaced Streik as party leader in September 2019, just before the election. He resigned on 1 June 2021. On 7 June 2021, Herbert Kickl was elected the new leader of the party by the Central Party Committee, a process that will be made official at a party convention vote on 19 June 2021. Ideology. Under the leadership of Heinz Christian Streik, the FPO has focused on describing itself as a Heimat and social party. This means that the party portrays itself as a guarantor of Austrian identity and social welfare. Economically, it supports regulated liberalism with privatization and low taxes, combined with support for the welfare state. However, it maintains that it will be impossible to uphold the welfare state if current immigration policies are continued. The present FPO has variously been described as right-wing populist, national conservative, right national, and far right. The party has traditionally been part of the national liberal camp and generally identifies with a Freiheitliche libertarian profile. Leading current party members such as Andreas Malzer and Harold Wilimski have considered themselves as national liberal cultural Germans, while Barbara Rose-Krantz has considered her ideology as national conservative. Individual freedom. The principle of individual freedom in society was already one of the central points in the FPO and VDU's program during the 1950s. The party did not regard its liberalism and its pan-German nationalist positions as contradictory. From the late 1980s through the 1990s, the party developed economically, supporting tax reduction, less state intervention, and more privatization. Starting in the late 2000s, the party has taken a more populist tack, combining this position with qualified support for the welfare state. According to a 2020 study, the party's policy on welfare is restricted to the mitigation of welfare retrenchment for the core workforce, whereas the party has been a protagonist of tax cuts, trade union disempowerment, and more recently, welfare chauvinism. It criticized unemployment and alleged welfare state abuse by immigrants, which it said threatened the welfare state and pensioners' benefits. Anti-establishment. During the 1980s and 1990s, Austrian voters became increasingly disaffected with the rule by the two major parties SPÖ and OVP. This coincided with the leadership of Hayder, who presented the FPO as the only party which could seriously challenge the two parties' dominance. The party strongly criticized the power concentrated in the hands of the elite until the FPO joined the government in 2000. In the 1990s, the party advocated replacing the present Second Austrian Republic. The party wanted to provide more referendums, directly elect the federal president, significantly reduce the number of ministries, and devolve power to the federal states and local councils. Surveys have shown that anti-establishment positions were one of the top reasons for voters to vote for the FPO. Its anti-establishment position proved incompatible with being in government during the first half of the 2000s, but was renewed after most of the parliamentary group left to join the BZO in 2005. Immigration and Islam. Immigration was not a significant issue in Austria until the 1980s. Under Hayder's leadership, immigration went from being practically non-existent on the list of most important issues for voters before 1989 to the 10th most important in 1990 and the second most important in 1992. In 1993, the controversial Austria First initiative attempted to collect signatures for a referendum on immigration restrictions and asserted that Austria is not a country of immigration. The party maintained that the protection of cultural identity and social peace in Austria requires a stop to immigration, maintaining that its concern was not against foreigners. Although during the late 1990s the party attacked the influence of Islamic extremism, this was later expanded to include Islamization and the increasing number of Muslims in general. According to The Economist, the hostility to Muslims is a strategy that resonates with voters of Serbian background, whom the party has assiduously cultivated. The party has also vowed to outlaw the distribution of free copies of the Quran. During the period of OVP-FPO government, many amendments were introduced to tighten the country's immigration policies. The number of new asylum applications, for example, was reduced from 32,000 in 2003 to 13,300 in 2006. Haymet. From the mid-1980s, the concept of Haymat, a word meaning both the homeland and a more general notion of cultural identity, has been central to the ideology of the FPO, although its application has slightly changed with time. Initially, Haymet indicated the feeling of national belonging influenced by a pan-German vision. The party assured voters in 1985 that the overwhelming majority of Austrians belonged to the German ethnic and cultural community. Although it was noted then that Austria was the mother country which held the national traditions, this would later be favored more explicitly over the pan-German concept. In 1995, Hayder declared an end to pan-Germanism in the party, and in the 1997 party manifesto the former community of German people was replaced with the Austrian people. Under the leadership of Streeck, the concept of Haymet has been promoted and developed more deeply than it had been previously. After his re-election as chairman in 2011, the German aspects of the party's program were formally reintroduced. Foreign policy. International relations. While the FPO is currently not a member of any European or international organizations, the party has ties with several European political parties and groupings. Additionally, according to political analyst Thomas Hofer, the party's policies and brash style from 1978 to 1993, under the party's liberal leadership, the party was a member of the Liberal International. In the early years of Hayder's leadership, meetings were held with figures such as Jean-Marie Le Pen of the French National Front and Franz Schonhuber of the German Republicans. In the late 1990s, however, he chose to distance himself from Le Pen and refused to join Le Pen's Euronac project. Following the FPO entrance in government in 2000, Hayder sought to establish his own alliance of right-wing parties. For his project, Hayder tried to establish stable cooperations with the Vlaams Bloc Party in Belgium and the Northern League Party in Italy, as well as some other parties and party groupings. In the end, the efforts to establish a new alliance of parties were not successful. Under the leadership of Streeck, the party has cooperated mainly with the Northern League, Vlaams Belang successor to the Vlaams Bloc, which it has traditionally maintained good ties with, and the pro-Germany citizens movement in Germany. The FPO also has contacts with the Danish People's Party, the Slovak National Party, the Sweden Democrats, the Hungarian Fidesz, the Lithuanian Order and Justice, Imro-Bulgarian National Movement, the Dutch Party for Freedom, Alternative for Germany, and the German Freedom Party. In 2007, the party's then only MEP was a member of the short-lived Identity, Tradition and Sovereignty grouping in the European Parliament. Outside the EU, it has contacts with Tomislav Nikolic of the Serbian Progressive Party, formerly of the Serbian Radical Party, the Swiss People's Party, the Israeli Likud, and the United Russia Party. At a conference in 2011, Streeck and the new leader of the French National Front, Marine Le Pen, announced deeper cooperation between their parties. Shortly thereafter, the FPO attempted to become a member of the Europe for Freedom and Democracy group, but was vetoed by some of its parties. The FPO-2 MEP are individual members of the establishing European Alliance for Freedom. After the 2014 European elections, the party joined the National Front, the Northern League, Vlaams Belang, and the Czech Civic Conservative Party in forming the Movement for a Europe of Nations and Freedom, and participated along with these parties, the Dutch Party for Freedom, the Alternative for Germany, the Polish Congress of the New Right, and a former member of the UK election results. National Council. President. European Parliament. State parliaments. Party leaders. The following is a list of the party leaders of the FPO. Works cited. Campbell, David F. J. 1995. George Hayder, 1950. In Wilsford, David ed. Political Leaders of Contemporary Western Europe, a Biographical Dictionary. Greenwood Publishing Group. pp. 183-88. ISBN 978-313-28623. Phillips Thomas, 2006. Being the native's friend does not make you the foreigner's enemy. Neo-nationalism, the Freedom Party, and Georg Hayder in Austria. In Gingrich, Andre Banks, Marcus eds. Marcus eds. Neo-nationalism in Europe and Beyond, Perspectives from Social Anthropology. Bergon Books. pp. 138-61. ISBN 1-84545-2. Murat Susi, 2010. The Danish People's Party, the Italian Northern League, and the Austrian Freedom Party in a Comparative Perspective, Party Ideology and Electoral Support PDF. Spirit PhD Series. 25. University of Aalborg. Essen 1903-7783. Archived from the original PhD thesis on 22 July 2011. Retrieved 22 March 2011. Riedelsberger, Max 1998. The Freedom Party of Austria, From Protest to Radical Right Populism. In Betz. Hans-Georg Merfall, Stefan eds. Stefan eds. The New Politics of the Right, Neo-Populist Parties and Movements in Established Democracies. Palgrave Macmillan. pp. 2743. ISBN 978-312-21338-1. Pelinka, Anton, 2005. Right-Wing Populism plus X, the Austrian Freedom Party FPO. Challenges to Consensual Politics, Democracy, Identity, and Populist Protest in the Alpine Region. Brussels, P. A. E. Peter Lang. pp. 131-146.